What's the crack, everyone? It's Nathan here, aka the Rambling Kern, and head instructor of Kern School of Combat. So today's video is a bit of a rambling one, as I'm prone to do, but it's on two very important topics with relation to weapon-based martial arts and self-defense in general. Now, if anyone would like me to do videos specifically around self-defense and my opinions on them, and the use of walking sticks and canes and shillelaghs and all that sort of things in self-defense, please do let me know. I'd be more than happy to do that. But this video is more of a discussion, and one that I want to open the discussion to my viewers. Because this is something that always happens whenever weapons are involved, and it's kind of a twofold thing, so I want to talk about both. And it's basically, I kind of jokingly call it martial arts top trumps. You see this a lot when it comes to self-defense especially, and because of what I do, I don't focus on self-defense. Now I'll touch on that in a minute and kind of explain my opinions on that. But you see this really around any sort of self-defense, and especially around weapon-based martial arts, where you get this like top trumps thing that goes on. And what I mean by that is, whenever, and I've had this many times on my YouTube, I've had people say this to me, I've had various different comments over the years. Whenever someone sees any particular weapon, they'll go, oh well, I'll just use X or I'll just use Y, and that will negate your weapon. So for example, if someone is learning like unarmed striking for self-defense, someone goes, oh well, I'll bring a stick, and then the next person will go, oh well, I'll bring a knife, and the next person says, well, I'll bring a gun, and you know, this just escalates up and up and up, and there's kind of no real end to it. So to give you all a bit of a clue, I am from Ireland. You know, that's the focus of the channel, is around Irish martial arts and Irish history. I don't really touch on a lot of the modern goings on of Ireland, because that's not really my focus. But I thought it was important to give you all context for what I do, and especially around like the use of self-defense in Ireland. So to quote a passage from Irish law, because I think it's important for people to understand this, the actual passage itself reads as follows. Where a person without lawful authority or reasonable excuse, the onus of providing which shall lie on him, has with him in any public place, goes on to list various different things, any other article whatsoever made or adapted for use causing injury to incapacitate, to cause injury or to incapacitate a person, he shall be guilty of an offence. So, in other words, under Irish law, anything that a police officer, or as we call them here, Gardaí, deem as a weapon is a weapon. So we don't have self-defense weapons. Now, even outside of that, we have some of the strictest gun laws in all of Europe. If you have a gun in Ireland, there's quite a small minority of people in the country who do. However, there's a lot of people who use them in day-to-day life. So for the biggest example, and I think the largest proportion of gun owners in Ireland, are farmers who need them for getting rid of vermin, all that sort of stuff. So the majority of guns in this country are for that purpose. There's very few handguns, and the majority of people who have those either have them for target shooting as members of gun clubs, or they're police, or a handful of criminals or gangs or anything like that. But that's not really the focus of this. My point is that we as a nation do not have access to firearms. Outside of that, we don't even have access to self-defense weapons. So stun guns, tasers, they are all outlawed here. Pepper spray is outlawed. All of that sort of stuff. And as you've kind of seen from that passage of law, anything that you don't really have a legitimate excuse to carry on you is deemed a weapon. So, for example, the classic like box cutter. There's plenty of tradesmen around the world who use these. You know, push open blade. This, if you are a plumber or handyman, whatever, if you have one of those on you, no one's really going to bat an eyelid. It makes sense. However, if I was to just walk down the street and have one on me, if I get stopped with it, I could be prosecuted for carrying a weapon. So this argument of, oh well, if this person has X, then I'll just bring Y, doesn't really apply here, because we don't have a abundance of weapons, as is the case in a lot of European countries. Now, I'm just kind of outlining this because I know a lot of my viewers are North American, and I know you guys have very different weapon laws and culture around that stuff than we do. So for me, something like a stick is quite an interesting thing to train with, because it's probably the most ubiquitous thing you'll find out and about, be it a branch on the ground, a walking cane, whatever. But this argument of, oh, well, if you're using a shillelagh, I'll just bring my gun and shoot you, is, to me, just a silly one. It's literally like, it's martial arts top trumps. It's saying, like, my dad will beat up your dad. That's great, but in a lot of countries in Europe, you won't have access to these things, and most people here don't have access to these things. Now that's, like I said, also falls outside of the realm of really what my group is all about. For me, I teach Irish stick fighting as a cultural thing. To me, it is a very important piece of Irish culture that I want to see maintained and continued. That's why I don't have any real dog in the fight with any particular organisation, because I just wanted to be part of all of them, to learn all I can about Irish stick fighting and to teach that to you guys, and obviously whoever wants to come and train in my club. So for me, self-defense is not my number one priority. Now, if I was to discuss self-defense, I have very strong opinions on certain things you should and shouldn't do, and I think a lot of those things aren't really ignored, or are ignored, I should say. The classic ones, in my opinion, that are kind of number 1 and 2 priorities of training self-defense is 1, be in physically good shape, and 2, be able to de-escalate the situation with your words. And 3, I know I said 2, but number 3 would be have awareness of your surroundings. If you're in a situation where, things might get a bit hairy, or you're walking through a rough neighborhood, keep your head, up, and don't be buried in your phone. Simple stuff like that is, to me, what's most important about self-defense. And number 1, I think, is a key one. A lot of people focus on, I got to learn all these super deadly techniques, but if you don't have the ability to apply them, and you aren't physically fit enough to do it, or you have a bad injury that doesn't allow you to run away from a situation, then you're going to be an easy target. And like I said, self-defense is not the focus of this video, but it's something that I did want to address because it's an important part of this discussion. Because anytime, like I said, when people look at what I do and what I teach with regards to weapon-based martial arts, they just say, well, I'll just do this, and that's fine. But that's not the focus of what I do, and it's not really a realistic argument in a lot of situations, because in a lot of parts of the world you can't have access to these things. And for example, in Ireland, we can't have access to these things. The other argument then I see is kind of the inverse of this, where people say, if you are training with these things, why don't you train with an actual shillelagh, and why don't you spar with these things and, take lumps out of each other? I've discussed this before in different videos, but these are dangerous. And so if it likes of this, if I just walk down the street with this isn't walking cane size. Like, you see, this is a kind of club size. Like, this is really designed for hitting stuff. So, if I was to go out on the street with this, it would look like I'm up to trouble unless I had a legitimate reason for it. I would, if a police officer went by, this could cause myself a lot of issues. So something like this, I wouldn't be using in the street, but, the inverse of that is that I wouldn't be using this in training either, because it is a bit too dangerous. Like, you've seen my testing videos, you've seen me use these things. These things cause a lot of damage. But then you get the opposite argument where people will say, oh, well, your training isn't realistic because you're not using the real thing. And, in a self-defense situation, I just do X. To me, that is the exact same argument. Because if you don't train your martial art at a realistic level with intensity and with a resisting opponent, you're not going to get the feedback that you need for when you need to do it. So if anyone ever comes to my club and does our sparring, we only spar for 2-minute rounds. That is incredibly intense if you've never done it, and especially if you're sparring at any sort of a high pace. If you're not used to that and you're in a self-defense scenario, it doesn't matter if you have all the coolest, most deadly techniques in the world. You're not going to be able to apply them. You're not going to know how to apply them. And the adrenaline's going to kick in, and you're going to gas out very quickly and not going to be able to apply those things. So I do understand the arguments of, well, you can't do X, Y, and Z. And I totally agree. There's numerous techniques, even in sparring, that you can't do. But you can show your sparring partner that you can do them. So I've discussed this one before. But even a classic example, everyone will understand this, even if you just have a very basic striking background. Punching someone in the back of the neck or the back of the head, incredibly dangerous. Now, if you did this with a stick or the butt of a stick, even more dangerous. But you can show a partner that you can do that. And that's where self-defense based training and sparring and resistive, someone tell me the correct term, training is incredibly important. Because if you can't just safely demo to your partner in sparring that you can do that, so for example, would you just give them a slap on the back of the head and show them like, oh look, that's not being defended, then realistically when it comes to trying to do that for real, you're just not going to have the reactions and the timing and the necessary understanding of how to do it. Now, like I said, my group isn't primarily focused on self-defense. That's not what we're about. But I train in a way where I feel if you don't train your techniques with a resisting partner, you're not going to really gain the full understanding of them. And you're also not going to know if those techniques work. It's a very important thing to train as if you are intending to use it, even if you're not. Because if you don't, you're not going to understand how to apply it when you need to. Now, I know that was a bit of ramble to say, a fairly succinct statement, but I think it's an important one. Because if you don't do that training, you're not going to understand it. But that being said, it's rare that you're going to get into a stick fight in your life. So, why? Well, for us and for my group, the primary reason is it's fun. And like I said, it's a cultural art, and I feel it's a very important thing to maintain because of it. So, essentially what I'm getting at here is if you find yourself getting into arguments online of like, oh, well, your art's no good because if you do that, then I'll do this, then really you're just shouting into the void, and you're kind of wasting your time and the person you're arguing with, because ultimately there will always be someone with a bigger stick. That argument is kind of invalid. If you don't get the training in, first and foremost, then what does it matter? It doesn't matter if you have a machine gun at home. If you don't know how to use the thing, it's pointless. And the same goes with stick fighting. If you don't know how to do the thing, you don't know how to apply it properly, it's pointless. And that's kind of more what I'm getting at. So people can make the arguments of, well, I'll just do X and you'll do Y. That's cool. But if you don't get the training in, you don't understand how to do it, it's pointless. Now, what do you guys think? Like I said, it's a bit of a rant, a bit of a ramble on my end, but I think it's a very important topic and one that people really, really ignore. And it's one that I think is a very important argument to have with people, because these ways of training and these methods of training and these approaches to training, I think, are very important, and they really dictate how a style is passed on. So for me, like I said, my group has a big focus around resistant training, around sparring, and around making sure and ensuring that those techniques work and they work under pressure. Now, I know for a lot of traditional arts, that's not their focus. And I've said this before in previous videos, I think that's great. For a lot of people, it is just that cultural link. They just want to do something, stay fit. That's fine. I know there's plenty of people who love going to, say, like boxercise classes, and that's great. But there's also a section of people who want to go to boxing classes and learn to box and get in the ring. Those are two very different ends of the spectrum. And even within my club, I have people who don't want to spar, and that's fine. And I have people who do some padded and don't want to do anything else, and that's fine. And then I have people who do full contact with rattan and minimal protection. You don't have to be one or the other. Different people will have different requirements, but ultimately knowing that padded, light stuff still translates into that full contact stuff is important. Now, obviously, you're not going to get the full understanding unless you do go for the full experience as such. But what do you think? Now, I know this might ruffle some feathers. I know some people will disagree with me, and that's what I want to hear. I want to hear your opinions on this. Do you think that those arguments are valid? That, oh, well, I'll just spring X, Y, and Z, and that'll finish the fight? Or do you think that getting the training, understanding how to use the weapon appropriately, and understanding what to do is more important? Because for me, that's how I feel, and that's what I think. And that also comes down to the methods of training that you use. I think that's even more important than the style you train. There's many different skills out there of various different disciplines. Some are wonderful and some are not so great. Lots of arguments I could have about this, lots of different topics I could bring up about that. And like I said, if you guys want to hear me discuss these things, I'm more than happy to do that. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. If you want to sponsor my work, you'll find my Patreon down below. If you want to come try out a class, we run them every Tuesday in South Dublin. You'll find details below. If you want to book me for a workshop, I'm opening them up this year. So if anyone wants to have me in their school or in their town, drop me an email. Let me know. I'd be more than happy to travel and share these arts. Once again, really a huge thank you for watching. This channel has just phenomenally grown this year. We're only a few subscribers out from 3,000, which was my goal for the year. So if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It only takes a second and it makes a world of difference to the channel and to me. So once again, thank you all oh so very much. Hope you had a wonderful Christmas and have a wonderful New Year. Thank you once again, and slán.